What's up, everybody? Dimitra Trejo here. And guess what? We are switching things around today on the podcast. I, Dimitra Trejo, am going to be interviewing the very famous, the very talented Joshua Moroles, because we're going to be getting into the podcast about podcasting. That's what I want to know. If you've been looking around and seeing all of your friends and business owners and everybody around you and their mothers starting a podcast, and you're thinking to yourself, well, I want to start a podcast too. Well, this is what that podcast is for. So we're going to get into it. We're going to have and ask him all of the awesome questions that we need to get started. So on today's show, we have Mr. Joshua Moroles.
What's up, guys? How's it going? Look, you're like a natural right there.
I'm telling you, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. You know, when we were messaging, I had messaged Mr. Moroles, and he's like, don't call me Mr., don't call me Sir, but we're going to be proper around here. When I had messaged Mr. Moroles, and I asked you a question, right, about like some podcasting thing that I'm sure like everybody at home is like, well, if I have a podcast, I do it this way, and I'd reach out to these people. So it was one of those where I wanted to pick your brain, and you said, come on the show, let's do a podcast about podcasting.
Yes, I think a lot of people don't understand that the more podcasts that are out there here in the Valley specifically is good for what I'm trying to push out. So it makes sense.
So why not talk about it, get into it, and possibly show people at home who are interested in possibly starting one what it actually takes.
Sure.
So are you ready? Because you're going to be in the hot seat.
Let's do it.
All right, then. So my first question for you, Mr. Moroles, is how did you get into podcasting? And when did you get into it?
Sure. Years ago, when I was telling you I worked at Dairy Queen from the age of 3 to 30, I left there because I saw Facebook was something that was huge. And I told my dad, I was like, dude, this is going to be huge. And it was for music at the time that I was using it for. And then it became something else, and it became bigger and bigger. And I was like, wow, I can't stay at Dairy Queen anymore. There's too much of an ocean out there. So I started a business with my buddy, and we got into digital marketing. We got trained as digital marketers. We have 10 certifications. And since then I split, but I always knew that podcasting at that time was kind of fresh, and I would always push it. Back in 2016, it was like, this is the newest thing in the world, and it never caught on. And then I did podcasting again the next year. This is the biggest thing in the world, never caught on. 2023, people are barely starting to get into podcasting, which is kind of crazy, but I've been doing it ever since then because I knew it was going to be something that people were going to need in the future, and I wanted to be the person that they called.
Wow. Well, talk about having years in advance and being ahead of the curve, because as you mentioned, everybody is starting a podcast. Now, that leads me to my next question. Is it too late to get into the podcast game? If people are just wanting to get into it now and jump into it, whether it be them personally as a hobby or using your services that you provide, is it too late? Has, the ship sailed already?
No, because the point of a podcast, well, for me, the way I see things in a marketing world is that you use marketing and a podcast to be able to create depth to yourself, your personal brand or your business. The thing is, nobody gets, okay, let me paint a story here. You're a lawyer and you have a lot of money, and you get out of a car and that's your video that you're showing on social media. Most people don't understand that. They cannot gravitate towards that because they don't have a badass Porsche, or they can't afford a bunch of purses. So the thing is, you have to give yourself depth. The podcast allows you to give yourself depth because you're having a conversation. People get to see how you speak, how you look, your mannerisms, all the things that make you an expert because you're talking about the things that you get to do.
I love that. I love that because I think you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head.
I'm telling you I'm right.
When you talk about, businesses and they love to show the end result, right? Like, I've done all of these wonderful things. I have all of these clients, and now look at me in my success. But I'm thinking, well, honey, like, what do you have to offer me, and what is your knowledge? And so that's what you're saying is when you have a podcast, that's where you can display all of your talents, all of your skills, and your expertise.
Yeah, and the thing is, what you have is what a lot of people don't have. And you can sit in front of a camera and speak, look pleasant, talk well. Not very many people can do that.
Right, because I'm not a lawyer, so I have to have something else, right? I have to have something else going for me. Well, I love that. And I think, let's talk about that. What do you do for somebody who maybe like me, isn't a lawyer. I don't have a business, but man, do I love to talk. And man, do I want to share some stories of some people. What advice do you give people like me? What direction should we go into?
So you need to start. The one thing that people don't do is they always talk about starting a podcast and it never happens.
Right.
This is the most common thing, and you'll see this because I buy everybody's podcast equipment when they stop. They buy all the equipment and they have all these things and they learn how to do it, but they don't know how to distribute. This is where the line is with a professional podcast. And this is what I want to explain, is this very easy for people to do this. There's a process. You have your content that you're pushing out, right? Mm-hmm. You need to record it. You need to know how to edit that content, either in video format or audio format. And then once you have that, what do you do with it?
Right. Where does it go? It goes somewhere where people can find it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And so, how does it get there? How does it get there?
That's the distribution parts. There's a whole level of podcasting, whereas you need your podcasting content and then the distribution. The distribution is where it goes onto YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, micro content, Apple Podcasts, all those other platforms that are out there.
Right.
That's the distribution part. And people can do this by getting an account on anchor.com. This has been around for a very long time, and Spotify just bought it out because they saw that podcasting was going to be huge. So they bought it out. It's very simple to use. You upload your content, and then it gets distributed to all these different podcast platforms.
So they do that for you?
Yes.
Nice.
They do that on the podcast platforms, not necessarily on YouTube, on Facebook, or Instagram. So what I like to do specifically is, I've found, and through the data and analytics, and I don't know if it's just me because of the things that I talk about, but nobody's going to sit through a 45-minute to an hour long podcast.
Unless it's about murder.
Yeah, possibly, yes. But for information and education and stuff that I do, like, nobody's going to listen to that stuff.
Right.
So you have to break it up into micro content. And this micro content is 1 minute to 90-second reels, TikTok reels, YouTube shorts. And surprisingly enough, you'll find out that those shorts get more views than the actual podcast.
I love that.
But
and
that is content marketing.
I like that. Yes, we're going to go back to that. But I also want to talk about, Mr. Moroles, you've jumped. You went to A to Z and telling me how to distribute the podcast. Sir, how do I start one?
So
step one, start the freaking podcast, right?
Yes.
And so what does it take to start a podcast? I mean, you're talking about getting a name, right? You're talking about planning that content. How do you do it as a professional?
Well, what do you want to talk about? That's another important part. Like, what is your show going to be about? Your target demographic, who are you going to be speaking to? Like, for you, who are you going to be speaking to?
Well, I don't want to say too much because I don't want nobody buying, but I do want to be very personable. And I'll let you know right now, it's not a business, right? It's definitely, as I mentioned to you before when we were off camera, I'm a storyteller by nature and I'm very nosy. And so I can, ask people questions.
You want, like, the cheese stuff?
I don't know about the cheese stuff, but yeah, let's get that tea then. Let's get that tea going. And let's just be personable and let's share your story and how it can benefit others, right? And so that's pretty much where I'm coming from and something from the heart. And I think everybody does, right? But like you, or as you've said, that you get the benefits of getting everybody's equipment after they say they want to start a podcast and then they're like, you know what, this isn't going to work. I think a big part of it that we're not talking about is consistency and the fact that a lot of people have trouble with that. Yeah. And I think you can do it even now. So look at TikTok, look at YouTube. Everybody wants to say, I want to be a TikToker. I want to be a YouTuber. I mean, even me, I bought a camera, I don't know how many years ago. And I said, I'm going to shoot content and I'm going to be a famous YouTuber. And then I was like, well, I just go to work from 8 to 5. Like, who wants to shoot? Nobody wants to see that, So how is that translated into, having consistency in a podcast? Because it's more than just picking up my phone and saying, hey guys, it's getting all of this fancy equipment, it's booking guests, it's all of that. So what advice do you have for somebody when it comes to consistency?
Sure. So consistency, let me precursor that. So the way I started in podcasting was with the anchor.com app, right? Through there, you can actually call someone and record that conversation directly on Anchor and upload it so that becomes a podcast. It doesn't have video, but it's directly to your phone, so you're having a phone conversation. That is literally a podcast. So it goes out and it gets distributed between all these different podcast platforms. That becomes your podcast. That is one way. The next level is putting video content. But here you need some type of editing skills.
Right. Sorry.
So the editing skills are hard for most people, and this is where most people get lost. But if you want to start a podcast, start audio, and then you'll learn eventually. If you stay consistent with that, you can become...
Right. So you're telling us and everybody at home that maybe wants to start a podcast, start small. Mm-hmm. I mean, start with something that is, know that you can digest and that you can work with on top of your busy schedule. I'm sure everybody who wants to start a podcast is very already ambitious, right? And they probably are already successful in their many other endeavors. And you're telling us, okay, do something that you can do consistency so that it is successful.
Yes, absolutely. And going back to the consistency part is why I like to create like hour-long podcasts and break them down into small micro content, because that content becomes your week of content. I don't think people really understand that. Like that becomes your Instagram stories. That becomes your reels, that becomes your TikToks, that becomes your YouTube shorts. You can literally upload that minute or 90-second video to YouTube and have it premiere as a video that gets traction every single day because it's notifying your people that are subscribed to your page.
Wow, I love that. Yeah. I love that, breaking it up, because you already have the content, so you might as well just break it up.
It's an extra step, but it is well worth it, because at the end of the day, those shorts will probably get more views than the actual podcast.
Right. And you're telling us that, tell me if this is true, video podcasting is more successful than regular audio podcasting.
It depends. Like sometimes I'll just push out audio content and I'll use the captions on Instagram to put out the captions, but I'll place like a really nice graphic on it, so that way just the words are coming out. I want them to focus on the words. Okay. So it really depends on what you want, but you have the content already, so you can manipulate the content any way you want. That's the important part.
I love that. And then distribute it to the different kinds of social medias that you have. And that is so awesome, and such a very awesome way to use what you have and keep it going, right? Yeah. And so that way you're keeping people engaged, and they're already on these social media platforms anyway, right? They're already on TikTok, they're already on Facebook.
Yeah, the thing is right now, I don't think people really understand this, is that it's one piece of content is not going to work per day. Okay. It's volume right now. You need volume across all different platforms, that way people see your face everywhere. Like if you Google my name, I specifically worked my name into all the different types of content that you'll see across the internet. That way, when you Google my name, you'll see me over here on medium.com. You'll see me on LinkedIn. You'll see me on YouTube. That's how you optimize the internet. And you can do that literally with a podcast.
And is that using search engine optimization?
So the cool thing about YouTube and YouTube Shorts is you can optimize it exactly the way you would like SEO. You can put it in the description. You can add the tags on YouTube, like all that little details. Even on LinkedIn articles, you can SEO that and put your name, your city. These are all little tiny hacks. Renaming the files that go onto the actual LinkedIn and the actual content pictures of the engagements. Of the actual thumbnails that go onto the YouTube pictures. Like you optimize those things. They all lead back to your name.
That is so awesome to know that, right? And to have that.
That's a marketing hack like crazy. I don't think people really understand
that. That's like niche. That's like, let me help you like get down to the nitty gritty of it and really get your money's worth when it comes to podcasting. Yeah. And so if people don't know how to do that, that's why they come to professionals like you, right? Mm-hmm. And when did you start doing that? When did you start saying, you know what, I have such a talent. I can share, all of my expertise, my equipment, all of those hacks, those marketing hacks to really help businesses put their content out there.
Well, I had always been into digital marketing. So this just evolved into the next step. Like I do content marketing for businesses. I do advertising for businesses. And it's all through social media, through YouTube, through TikTok, through radio. I can do all those digital ads where you see a digital imprint of something. I can do all that stuff, but I see that podcasting is an underserved market because it creates so much depth. Like I don't think people really understand it. Like the podcast, if you get the right person interviewing the right person, it creates a ton of depth that nobody ever sees. Like the conversations you have with your coworkers or your girlfriends or your friends, like that stuff gets translated into a podcast that people can see. Like people like to work with people they know, like, and trust, but they have to be competent.
Right.
So the podcast shows that.
Right. And when
Did that answer your question?
It does. It did. And I also wanted you to share about, just how talented you are, because I don't know if people know. I mean, I'm walking in right now and you're giving me a tour of this amazing studio and, all the people that you collaborate with and the awards that you've gotten. I mean, if people are interested in starting a podcast, they should really inquire, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think people really understand. I only have like 5 skills. So I just happen to be really
skills.
good at I just happen to be really good at those skills. Like it's only 5 things that I know really, really, really well. And it's how to optimize the internet specifically for businesses and entrepreneurs. But I understand that the more people that get into podcasting, the better it is for me, because they're going to see like it's a lot of work. But when they get to the point where they can't do it, then I'll just take them on as clients or I'll help them along the way.
Awesome. Well, that's awesome. I also wanted to talk about, you had just mentioned, conversations that you have with your friends, conversations that you have with your coworkers. And I'm starting to realize that all of the podcasts that I like listening to are personable and are with 1 or 2 more people, whether that be, an interview form. It's never really somebody that's just talking by themselves, right? And my question is, in your experience, have you seen there be more success in maybe somebody who is alone that wants to start a podcast and bring guests on because they can only rely and have to rely on themselves, versus getting a bunch of friends and saying, guys, let's all start a podcast? And, just like everything else, people kind of can't make one episode and then it kind of falls apart. What have you seen in your experience?
It really depends on your goals. Like for me, I push content marketing and personal branding. The only way you can build a strong personal brand is through education, information, or entertainment, or any of the 3, like intertwined. That's the only way you can do it. So if people are going to your content to learn something, then it doesn't matter if you're talking with a guest or by yourself.
Okay.
Because you're giving them the value. You're giving them what they're there for. Versus, and I've seen this in the past, and I moved away from this because when me and Robert were chatting about life and all that stuff, like people don't really care.
Right. Unless they personally know you.
Yes. Yeah. Unless they personally know you. Like my mom's not sitting around for 45 minutes watching my stuff. Like I don't think she cares.
Right.
The thing is, like, you have to give value. So yesterday I had a podcast with Jennifer Sanchez, which just had a cancer. She just finished her cancer treatments. So the podcast around that isn't about marketing, but it's more of a conversation. And I came from it from a way is like, what to expect when you're about to get cancer, or what happens when you get cancer through the family. So you're always providing value. It's just not like a bunch of guys just drinking beer
right,
while they're having a podcast, because at the end of the day, that's only going to last for so long. You're not providing any value.
Right. And it goes back to content. How much content can you make with, drinking beers and chatting away about possible insiders that nobody knows about, right?
Yes, exactly.
So it's about building that. Would you say it's beneficial to build out that skeleton before you even get started on marketing components of it? Like, what is that content going to look like based on entertaining education and the other component that you mentioned?
Well, it depends on your skills. Like, if you should only talk about what you know. Like, you won't hear me talking about certain things, like, because I just have no knowledge of it. So I stick to kind of what I know. But I'm also I'm very interested in people's lives. Like me personally, I'll question people and I'll ask them like some really deep questions, just because I know I can ask them in a podcast format, because for some reason, like, you're stripped down here. Like, when you're having a conversation for 45 minutes, we're sharing something that's very intimate together because we're having a conversation. Conversations don't happen very often. When's the last time you had a deep, meaningful conversation?
Where I could actually ask people, right, in details, well, then what did you do, right? And then what did they say, right? It seems like it only comes whenever I'm with my friends, and that's few and far in between with such a busy life that we all have now.
Imagine the connection that you have with the person that's sitting across you when you have those deep conversations. Like, nobody has conversations. And I think that's something that's wrong with the world. Is like, people don't converse.
Right.
They don't talk. Like, that's a lost art. Like, talking to somebody that you just met, or somebody that you're going to invite on a podcast.
Right.
Like, it's a very deep thing.
As is talking on the phone. I don't do that anymore. Like, if you're not my husband, if you're not my mother, like, please just send me a voicemail. Or like,
Send me a text.
please just text me. Or like, I communicate with my friends. We'll send each other funny TikToks. That's my communication form. And it's like, because it's either everybody's really busy, we're all have conflicting schedules, and we don't get on the phone anymore.
Well,
I remember when I was a little girl, I'm dating myself, but when the phone would be on the wall and you'd have like that cord connected to it, but I would be on the phone all day talking to my friends and laughing and reading articles to each other, and just like, really, there was nothing else to do but talk.
Yeah.
And that is definitely a lost art form, because I don't know who does that anymore.
Well, the thing with podcasts is it forces you to create 30 to 40 minutes of this just alone time. Like, we have to focus on the conversation. It's not like distractions that you're on the phone anymore. Like, this conversation is strictly about what we're going to talk about. That's awesome. The great thing about podcasts.
Right. And so I think there's many benefits, right? And not only are you promoting yourself if you want to, not only are you promoting your business, promoting your brand, but you're also getting to know some amazing people if you do happen to interview people and bring them on and learn a little bit about their story and share their story with your viewers, right? Which leads me to my next question.
Sure.
Okay, hello, we've picked a name, right? We've talked about all of the different ways that we want to put that out there. We haven't talked about equipment and what I need, and I don't know anything about all of these wonderful fancy gadgets that you have, and it's so intimidating. What do you do for somebody who wants to get into podcasting, but now you have the other component of like, get to editing, get to audio editing and video editing, and what's the best microphone, and do I need a camera, and what about lighting, and what about sets?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about podcasts is people are more willing to forgive the audio. So what I'm trying to say is, like, if you have really good audio, people will watch it versus crappy video. Like, if your video is crappy, if the audio is really good, they'll take the time to listen to it. Versus the other way, if your audio sucks, they'll just log off. Like, it doesn't make sense to not have good audio. So always start with good audio. Crisp, clean audio is always the way to go. And then you can add on your... So I know Rock and Roll James, and when I went to do his podcast, he had phones up instead of the cameras that I have here, but phones connected to iPads. And it just goes through a different program, and it goes directly onto the iPad where they can switch different things. But he has an engineer doing that the whole time. I'm physically clicking buttons back here, but I'm just clicking 1 and 2. So it's going back to camera 1, camera 2.
That's so awesome.
But the thing is, you don't need all this fancy equipment. Start with your phone. Like this Rodecaster right here, it's a Rodecaster Pro that has 4 different inputs. It's a little advanced, but they sell smaller ones at Best Buy that have exactly the same 4, where you can take it and travel with it, and you can have really crisp audio. But also, if you do with your iPhone, your earphones, like, that's really good audio too.
Right.
So it just really depends on what you want, because you should start with clean audio and then work your way up to getting clean video.
Right. Okay. Well,
Did
that
answer
sounds
your
good.
question?
It does. But now give us some names. What mic are you using, or what?
These are, I think, Rode mics here. Rode mics. Everything here is Rode. Like, nowadays, they companies specifically made stuff for people who want to get into podcasting, and they made it very easy.
Nice.
So I use different programs to edit, which is Final Cut Pro. I think most people don't do that. But
Yes,
I'm
familiar with Final Cut Pro. So you can use Final Cut Pro to edit audio?
Yeah, absolutely. Just send it out as an MP3 file.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I know how to do that. Okay, I'm already getting excited. All right, step 1, start a podcast. Step 2. Sounds good. Now, I also want to get into the fun part. Okay, this is the juicy part. This is the part that I'm most excited about, because let's say we already have a name, which, by the way, you need to get a domain name for, correct?
No,
like you need to.
If you want to have a website for your podcast, you can.
Okay.
But you don't necessarily need to. Like, I don't even use, I don't put any of my content on my website, because it's already on so many different sites. Like, it's leading back to my name anyways.
Well, TikTok lied to me. They said, step 1, get a domain name. So there I go. And I'm like, da-da-da-da-da. Okay.
That's only if you're going to make a website for your specific podcast. But then that becomes an added cost, because now you got to pay your yearly subscription to your website.
Right.
So that's another thing that is going to incur costs. Like, you want to get away as cheap as possible when you're starting, because you don't want to invest any money.
Well, hell. All right. Thank you for that. See, that's why I'm here. All right. Sounds good.
But good audio.
Good audio is something that we should definitely invest in. Okay. Well, brings me back to all the fun stuff, which is the marketing component of starting your podcast, which is so fun because you get to do these amazing photo shoots. You get to, do all of these promos. You get to make wonderful artwork and put it out there. And you have all of your friends and families cheering you on and saying, wow, you're doing this thing that you really love. Congratulations. You started a podcast and bravo. And you could find me here and there. Tell us about that. Like, what is that whole component about? Because let me tell you, I'm sure anybody who starts a podcast and starts doing photo shoots just feels like a superstar. So how do you feel? What do you tell people who are interested in possibly marketing? Is that something that you offer?
Yes. So this studio is specifically created to be able to make any type of content that we need to push out on any platform. But the thing is, you kind of skipped a few steps because
okay. Sounds good.
I know when people start a podcast, they're like, yes, we want marketing content, but nobody really thinks about that stuff. So what does that look like? What do you use right now to edit?
Edit what?
Anything.
I use my phone.
Okay. What do you use?
InShot.
InShot, okay.
I use CapCut. I don't know, anything that I can use off my phone, anything that I don't have to upload onto the computer, open up an editing, work it in, especially if it's phone, content
phone really,
format.
So when you jump onto podcast, you will need to upload through a desktop. And that's one more of the challenging things. But the cool thing about it is you get to optimize it a lot more. So one of the things that I use to edit all the marketing content that I use for my articles and all that stuff is I take pictures over there. And then I cut my image out, and then I'll go to Canva and create badass thumbnails and different type of content. So I don't think people really understand that Canva.com is owned by Robert Kiyosaki. He's owned it for years. This guy is a billionaire. So eventually on Canva.com, you'll be able to make websites. This is like the future of what's coming in the future, like for content creation, because the content creation world right now, that's the biggest commodity that's out there. Like people that create content are very valuable to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. They rely on their content creators. So the more people that create content, the better it is for them because they're bringing eyeballs to their platforms.
Right.
So Canva.com, go on there, figure out how to use it. It's free. I get the paid version, but
I thought it was only for graphics for events.
You can make. I literally have created intros to documentaries on that, and it's like the best kept secret. Like when I use it in front of graphic artists that use Photoshop. Using that, I was like, yeah, dude, I finished my content like this. It's taken them an hour to go on to Photoshop and do the exact same thing.
Well, Canva's really, it's very user-friendly and it's very plug and play. Mm-hmm. I mean, talk about template galore, right? I mean, you can create a template that has, these are my thumbnails, these are the intros to, TikToks or whatever it is. Yeah. And I guess you can. If you have the paid subscription, you can build content out for the month, right? You make graphics, you can make thumbnails. That could be your one-stop shop.
Yeah.
For, by the way, Canva, this is a plug, right? Bring in that money because we're plugging you. But it really is so easy to use. I can totally see that.
And at the end of the day, nobody knows where you created the content from. I created content for Chick-fil-A, Rio Grande Valley off of Canva.com. And nobody knows and nobody cares because they want the end content. That's all that matters. If it's clean, that's all that matters.
That's all that matters. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. So then marketing components, you're saying definitely a resource would be Canva.
Yep.
For beginners, for people that just want to
No, not even beginners. I'm a professional.
Beginners and Joshua Moroles.
my
From
thing
A to Z, Dimitra to Joshua Moroles.
My thing is to find efficient ways to do things because at the end of the day, if you're working on an hour of content that somebody can consume, and you get 2 views off it, what's the point?
It's the return on investment for me.
Yes.
That is the big one.
Time is very important, and using Canva.com just helps me.
All right. Well, speaking of time, be real. Mm-hmm. What does it look like on a weekly basis to throw out a podcast? And I'm not just talking about having somebody here, which takes time, setting it up, editing, promoting, all of that.
Well, going back to the efficient part is I don't edit my podcasts. I know a lot of people that do. So if we fumble on a word, I'm not going to edit it out.
Mira.
I called me the lazy part, but I have found that
He's like, I should have told you.
nobody is going to watch, for my sake, nobody's going to watch a 45-minute to an hour-long content piece of a podcast.
Right.
The micro content is what really matters because you're bringing that down into small subjects that you can push out that are digestible. So going back to how long, I typically go for 45 to an hour long podcast, and that gives me at least 10 to 15 pieces of content that I can push out through the week. And by the end of the week, like I already have my podcast scheduled for Saturday morning at 8 a.m. The next one that's going out is already scheduled. This micro content I'm going to be pushing out every single day. I don't even worry about the content that's going out at 8 a.m. because I know there's not going to be that many views. The views that really come in that matter to me are throughout the week that I push out the micro content.
Nice. Wow. But I also feel like it's very beneficial because let's say that there is that small audience that does want to listen to it all and will sit through this, and you're making content for them. Mm-hmm. You're making content, for the people on social media. It's benefiting a variety of people and a variety of different audiences.
You're right, because if somebody sits through a 45-minute to an hour podcast, they're very interested in what you're talking about. So chances are that becomes a better lead, a better qualified lead down the line, because they're listening to your 45 minutes of marketing content. They probably need it, or they need help, or they're going to become a lead and reach out to you. Those are the cleanest leads that you'll get, because they watch so much content.
Right. And you can appreciate people like that, right? It's like, hey, you sat through the whole thing. Oh my goodness.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, because it was really hard. Well, that's awesome. That's amazing. So we've kind of gone through at least everything that I think, you would need. What am I missing? What is somebody who's starting a podcast missing that we haven't spoken about yet?
I would say, going back to the consistency part, a lot of people will go into a podcast and be like, all right, I made one piece of content, and then they fall off the planet.
That's me. I'd be like, everybody like it.
Well, the thing is it's very hard to get people to get on your schedule. So that's why I'm very moldable. Like when you reached out to me, I was like, let's book it now, because I know that I need content. I thrive on content marketing. So I need content every single week. And I have a ton of content that I can push out. Like I have 3 of these that are just filled with content that I can push out every single day. But I like the podcast format because people get to see how I speak, my mannerisms, and just how I do business. I think that's a very important that people need to understand, is like, you are the face of your business. Why not talk about it all the time? Like, what the goal of your business is to make money.
Right.
And to help people. If you can make money helping people, why not?
Can I ask about ad revenue? Can I ask about, once upon a time, let's say I start the damn podcast, I'm doing really well, and now I want to rake in some money. Mm-hmm. Where do I get started?
So with all the podcasts that I have created on YouTube, guess how much I've made in this past month? And I generate content like crazy.
$500.
$5.34.
Sir.
So it depends on the content that is pushing out. You're not doing it to make money from these platforms. You're doing it for credibility. The thing about podcasts is it increases your credibility and it shows your expertise, because you make money other ways. This is just one way of making money, right? But the words that come out of your mouth, the things that you project your expertise, people listen to that. And people want to work with somebody that's knowledgeable, and they know what they're talking about. They know what they're doing. So that translates into money. Eventually, content marketing is different than advertising or ad dollars. So content marketing is giving out goodwill. Through this talking every single day that I post something out is goodwill. That's content marketing. Advertising, you'll get immediate results. So this is like throwing out Facebook ads for a specific reason. You'll get the lead instantly. Content marketing is giving free will. And then eventually people come to you.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for letting me know the difference. What about podcasts that I already listen to who get ads like Squarespace or something? Because I listen to a lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of murder podcasts. So I really should probably listen to something more positive. But it's the storytelling aspect. It's a story from starting from the beginning to the end. How do they get those ad spaces? How do they get those opportunities to promote, big brands?
Views. The more views you have, the more eyeballs you have. And in this world, it's about eyeballs. How many views can you get? So I have to be careful with how I say this, because the views don't always translate to the monetary gain, but they do. So I get less views on my content because it's very niche. It's about certain things, but my money comes from business owners that hire me, versus the other way. Like gets Azalduas to sponsor me, right?
Right.
He might pay a certain amounts per month, and I'll plug his show.
Okay.
Like right here, boom.
Here we go.
Marketing.
Dun, da, da,
So
da, da, da.
that's another thing too, is like the product placement in podcasts, since it's video, can be anything. Like I can have smart water or whatever, anything here that's showing the more touch points a business has, the better it is. People need at least 12 touch points to be able to make a transaction.
So there's multiple ways. I'm here thinking, I just need a commercial for gain or something. It turns out there's multiple ways.
Many ways to monetize.
Make money and monetize.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm really learning. I hope everybody out there is learning too, because there's so many different options and opportunities.
Of the digital world that we live in, like my goal is to be able to make as much money as I can from the internet. And I think nowadays it's easier for people to learn because of Google. You can Google it.
You can YouTube everything.
Yeah.
I just TikTok everything now. Give it to me in 3 minutes or less. I don't want to hear no intros and no outros.
Yep.
Tell me what I need to fix this sink.
And that's where the value comes in with those micro content. Like, give me what I need, and then I'll come back again and if you give people and you give them really good content, they'll keep coming back.
Well, I love it. Also, if you're personable, right? How important is that?
Yes. It's an interesting thing, because I've filmed so many people in front of a camera, and a lot of them will just like freeze. And it's the most craziest thing that you'll ever see, because they're like, I can have this conversation with you, but in front of a camera, as soon as it turns on, like they just go blank.
Oh, no.
So I have found out how to coach my clients and how to coach people, like have a conversation, like forget they're there.
Right.
You really can't forget they're there. But it's a conversation.
Right.
Like I'll pull them into the conversation, or the best thing is to have a bulleted list of what you're going to talk about in your episode. That way you don't deviate from anything else. You give them what they're going to give them, and that's what they're going to get.
Right. And I think it also helps the viewer, right? People don't want to hear you going on different tangents all the time. Let's stick to a script, which is also something that is of benefit, right? I think to anybody starting a podcast is have a script and stick to it so that people understand and know what's coming up next.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yes.
All right.
What else you got for me?
Honestly, I just my last chapter in this book of getting started with podcasts is just what advice do you have for somebody? Because I think, as I mentioned in the beginning, I've had so many wonderful conversations with friends and colleagues and their wonderful ideas on how they want to start their own podcast, including myself. But it's just taking that step. I think for me, one thing that I'm scared of is failure. What do you tell somebody like that who wants to start on this big journey?
The most views you're going to get is that episode. So you push it out, those are the least amount of views that you're going to get. So it's only going to go up more and more. So the more you do it, the better you get at your craft, the better you get at speaking, the better you get at bullet pointing these conversations. Like, you just need to do it often, because it would be inconceivable to get worse at it if the more you do it. And if you do, well, you should just throw it away.
Just throw it away and give me the equipment.
Yes, I'll buy it from you. But the thing is, like, I think the consistency part is like you have to do it to get better at it. That's the only way. Only way.
All right, sounds good. Well, I've loved it. I've had such a good time. How are we on time?
We're good. Sign us off.
Mira, ya es tiempo. Ahí los vemos, mijos, mijas. No. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Joshua Moroles, and thank you so much for watching us here. We've had such a good time talking about podcasting on a podcast. We hope you learned something. We'll see you next time.